do not look at your phone. Your phone is a trigger for stress. Looking at all the messages, the emails, the notifications, there's stress. You shouldn't have it by your bed. You can argue like all this EMF stuff, it's a whole other conversation, whether you believe that or not. But regardless, that phone is the biggest anchor in your life.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to have someone who has been a mentor to me in many ways, and I actually bought his book, which we'll talk about here today real soon, called The Energy Formula, something I'm sure everyone listening would love to have more of. Energy, there it is, awesome. And it's a book I actually bought before I even knew Shawn. And Shawn is someone who's kind of a legend in the supplement industry. He's kind of been tagged as the world's greatest formulator. He's actually worked behind the scenes with many of the big supplement companies, including Peak Performance. So he maybe a lot of the supplements you take, they might have been developed or formulated with the help of Shawn. Shawn is also he's not, in addition to being a product formulation expert, he's also a biohacker, speaks at all these big biohacking conferences. He's obviously an expert on energy. He's going to help you understand how energy is created with mitochondrial health and how to get more of it. A whole bunch of shortcuts and biohacks to optimize your longevity, energy, and your quality of life. And he'll show you how to create measurable change in 30 short days with the help of included surveys that he has in his book. So before we jump right into it, if you are a repeat listener, if you could please subscribe, rate, review, like, and share. If you get value out of this episode, which I'm sure you will, please do share it with everyone. And with that being said, I'm so happy to announce Shawn Wells, author of The Energy Formula. Thank you, Shawn, for joining us today.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be on. It's nice to be reunited. I loved the last time we were together and working on all these things. It's a blast to be back.
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, definitely a lot to jump into here today. And there's so many different topics we could cover. You speak on big stages. In fact, you just told me you just came back from traveling around Europe where you were speaking at big biohacking conferences there. And then you're going to more places tomorrow. You're always on the go, which maybe would be a good thing to talk about. How do you sustain all your energy with all this travel that you're always doing as well? But maybe just a quick, brief background of kind of how did you get into all this and get so interested in being biohacking and health?
It was when my health crashed, really, and I have the wounded healer kind of story as well. That so many people have, the hero's journey, if you will. I got very sick. I couldn't get out of bed for about 6 months. I struggled to take a few steps. I got Epstein-Barr that was really advanced, and I had a host of autoimmune issues, and I was considering suicide during that time. It was a struggle to think that I would ever have a productive life again. And then I started down the path of keto. This is about 20 years ago. And doing keto, paleo, and some of these things way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And looking into supplements that help with the immune system in particular back then. And some of the things that I was doing, now I'm understanding what they do on a deeper level, but I stumbled into many things that did work. And then I started becoming passionate about supplements and working at GNCs and vitamin shops. And I got my master's in nutrition as well as biochemistry. And my undergrad was in business. So it was like kind of a really big shift. But that led me down this path for sure. And growing up, I had a pretty chaotic childhood. I'll say, like, I was bullied quite a bit. I became morbidly obese, and then later on became anorexic. There was just like a lot of self-loathing and insecurity and depression and at points suicidal thoughts that were difficult. I never felt like I was good enough, like a lot of imposter syndrome. I was very driven, had great grades, had great accomplishments, was very intelligent, but never had inner peace, never had the ability to relax, like get into like a parasympathetic state. I think I was always vigilant. I was always on guard for someone wanting to hurt me, and it just led me down a path that was not a great one, and it's something that I'm still working on. It's not like a, the hero's journey where everything's solved.
Mhm.
I had a massive shift about 3 years ago in the psychedelic space too, that really cracked me open and kind of jumped into my operating system, if you will. That changed a lot of things as well. So, it's still a path that I'm working on, but I definitely used to have a brain that was, we could talk about, that was not neuroplastic. I would stay stuck in loops, and
Mm.
if someone said something to me, I took it very personally, and then I would be spending the next hours, days, weeks, months, like thinking about it, staying in it, like, and that's where I was at. So this
Mm.
path of biohacking, it started with, I needed to get out of bed. So it was the hacks, the nutrition, the supplements, and even peptides and stem cells, and all these kinds of things that are so cool to talk about. But more recently, it's been things like plant medicine and journaling and meditation and breath work and grounding and yoga, and doing saunas, and things like that, where it's me learning to love myself, give myself peace of mind, and peace in my heart, and just those kinds of explorations versus like this kind of ultra masculinized, like, hack into it and let me, there is some element of like self-loathing, I feel like, that was present in biohacking, of just like, how do I get more, more, more? And it has shifted more into this optimization space, peak
Mm.
performance,
Mhm. Mhm.
maybe, where it's like, how do we not just have more, but how do we have more balance? How do we have better? And really exploring that. So that's a long answer to your question, but
That was good.
that's my journey.
There's a lot of nuggets in there, man. A lot of nuggets. And I love when people health is not just about, right. There's the nutrition, and we've talked about paleo and keto, and I'm sure people have heard about it, but it's not just about the body part, right? Like you can work out and you can, eat paleo or whatever, but there's a big part of the mental aspect, right? And then there's even the mental aspect of like, why don't some people work out, or why don't some people eat healthy, and what are the psychological triggers going on behind them there. So man, there's so many different directions we could go here. I definitely want to talk about having more energy in the energy formula book that you wrote as well. So I'm just trying to think which way is the best direction to go, because there's so many good nuggets that we could go in there. um, so let's I think it'll all kind of relate together. So let's talk about like the energy formula and some of the things that you talk about in terms of having more energy. And I think it'll probably come full circle with some of the other things you just mentioned as well. Yeah.
So the energy formula book, you're saying?
Yeah, the book and some of the concepts that you're talking about in
Yeah.
there.
So it's this may not be obvious upon looking at it, but the energy formula isn't, and you do know this because you've listened to it, but it's an acronym for experiment, nutrition, exercise, routines, growth, and your tribe. And so the
Mm.
subtitle is the 6 life-changing ingredients to unleash your limitless potential. And so, just a quick synopsis of each of those. Experiment is the idea of, do not take from me that there's one way to do something. And anyone who says that is wrong.
Mm.
And that's just marketing. Experiment is understanding your bio individuality and how we can dive into that. Like how you are unique. There's no one study or one ingredient for the 8 billion people on the planet. So it's looking into your blood work, looking into the things that you're passionate about and will continue to do, your gut microbiome, looking into epigenetics, all of these kinds of things, and then taking a snapshot there, getting a baseline, and then working towards what's optimized for you as well, and watching that evolve. So that's experiment.
Yeah, and that's
Nutrition.
something we've
Mhm.
really realized as we, on this podcast. I think when I first, because I had such a big health transformation by going paleo, originally I was just kind of like, when I first, I was so excited about it, but I guess you could say kind of closed minded, because I was like, oh, well, like everyone should just do paleo. It's like so simple, like stop eating sugar and this and fried foods and alcohol and just, do the paleo and you'll be good. And it was like one size fits all for everything. But I realized that the more I interview health experts and the more I've become, I guess, evolved, for lack of a better word or whatever, for in terms of health, it really is that different things work for different people. And that's one thing I really like what you said, experiment, because I'm constantly experimenting. I'm experimenting with different foods, experimenting with different supplements, and seeing what works for me. Okay, this works, this doesn't work. I mean, there are some people, I know vegans who are extremely happy and extremely healthy, and I know people, including myself, who tried vegan and it was awful for me. I know people who eat certain foods, like beans, and it gives them an autoimmune disease, or really, really is detrimental to their body, and other people eat beans every day and they're okay. And so it really is something where you have to experiment for yourself and see what works for you. So I love that.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. And there's a deeper lesson in there of us not projecting on other people.
Yes.
There's a deep lesson there, a powerful lesson there about, and this is, I'm saying this from my perspective of, I used to do this quite a bit too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all still do it to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
but to be aware of it, at least, that we're constantly projecting on each other our realities, and to grant someone their own sovereignty is a way to allow for yours.
Mm.
That my path is innately mine and your path is innately yours, and you can pursue that and I can pursue mine, and we both can be right.
Yeah.
Every man has their own path, and to allow someone the right to pursue that is to allow you the right to pursue yours ultimately.
That
That
is
there's
good.
freedom in that.
That's really good, man. Yeah. That's some good deep stuff. What's the
Yeah,
next one? So E is experiment, and then we got N.
and it's nutrition. So getting into keto, paleo, vegan, carnivore, Mediterranean, getting into all those things that, as you said, what is the best path? Well, it's a well-constructed diet. I do believe that whole food, if I was to pick one thing to base some foundation upon, it's that. Like, it's hard to argue that. I,
Mm-hmm.
I like you're saying, I know people who do well on a vegan diet. I know people who do amazing on a carnivore diet, and certainly something in between, like Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think it's hard to argue that we're not meant for whole food and we should eat a whole lot less of the ultra processed foods.
Mm-hmm.
That seems clear to me.
Yeah.
So that's the foundation, and just going through which one would work best for you. And the best diet is one that isn't a diet by nature, but is a lifestyle and something that you will stick with. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not 8 to 12 weeks, it's the next 8 to 12 years and beyond.
Right.
So that's something that I discussed in there. And then certainly the science of keto and how you can do metabolic flexibility, and do cyclical keto and targeted ketogenic dieting. And again, experiment with that and see if that works for you. For many people, for you and now me, keto may not be the biggest deal. But for people that are metabolically inflexible, for people
Mm-hmm.
that are metabolically dysfunctional, which is 87% of Americans,
Mm.
87%, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That the
And what does that
ketogenic,
mean exactly for someone who might not understand? What does metabolically dysfunctional mean?
yeah, that's going to mean basically pre-diabetic to diabetic, insulin resistance, glucose intolerance, which it's also going to lead into like dyslipidemia, hypertension, potentially renal dysfunction. It's just heading down this path of, at the heart of almost all disease. Almost all disease is not genetic as much as we were told. I would say 98%, 99% of diseases are metabolic in nature. So that dysfunction leads into cancer, coronary heart disease, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. Those are not genetic diseases. Something like a growth hormone giantism, that kind of thing. That's a genetic disease, super rare. Those kinds of things, they're rare. But these diseases that you can get along your life path are not genetic in nature. They are metabolic in nature. And so metabolic dysfunction is often at the core, which is mitochondrial dysfunction. And there is a lack of cellular energy as a result. And that state is called insufficient cellular energy. The acronym is ICE, or in the brain, it's called brain energy gap. And there's a shortfall of energy. And with that shortfall, the mitochondria and then therefore the cell become impaired. And then you start kicking out more oxidative stress, oxidation. You have more glycation, which is blood sugar damage. You have more inflammation. And then you have these dying cells, which is called senescence. And that signals that your body is dying and not doing well. And you don't have enough energy to run your body. So then you run into autoimmunity. You run into these disease states. You run into fatigue, chronic fatigue syndrome, hypertonic muscles, meaning like your muscles are always tight. You have brain fog. Literally like your synapses are firing slower. Like all of this stuff is happening as a result of you not having enough energy. So, that's at the core of this. So glucose intolerance, insulin resistance is something to be highly mindful of. And one of the things I discuss in the book is one of the cheapest ways I believe we could radically change medicine is have 3 simple labs that are markers for your mitochondrial function and therefore markers towards nearly all disease states. And by the way, that metabolic dysfunction is inherent to biological aging over chronological aging, how fast you're aging biologically. And the more energy you have cellularly, mitochondrially, the better you're aging. The slower you're aging, the longer your telomeres are, the more healthy your DNA is, the lower your inflammation is, the lower your glycation is, the lower your oxidation is. All of these things are better as a result of you having more energy. So going full circle, that the ketogenic diet can turn the lights back on for people that are in this insulin resistant state.
Yeah. Because
they don't have enough energy. Glucose, there's too much of it. It's worn down these GLUT4, some people say GLUT4 receptors. You're not pulling in enough glucose, and you're resistant to the glucose and pulling it in, and your insulin is staying elevated. And you basically don't have enough cellular energy. And this is making you tired, making you more diseased, making you age faster, and getting an alternate fuel source, which is ketones, can literally just make you feel like someone just turned the lights back on, and you feel like an energy you haven't felt in years. And so that alone can be pretty profound in quality of life, not even getting into weight loss, and ketones can, reduce appetite and blah, all these things. That's all great.
Yeah.
But literally as an alternate fuel source, because 50, 100 years ago, when we were not eating as much, when it was harder to find food, when in the winter we might have ate more meat, therefore protein and fat versus carbohydrate, The carbohydrate we would have eaten was much lower glycemic, higher in fiber, had more resistant starches.
Mm-hmm.
We would go a long time between meals. Sometimes it was called starvation. Sometimes you call it fasting.
Mm-hmm.
You had to work for food. You weren't sedentary. You were working your muscles. We had manual labor. We were often in a caloric deficit. So we were in ketosis a lot.
Yeah.
And we were metabolically flexible. That's what that means. We're meant to be dual fuel, ketones and glucose. And the brain actually prefers ketones. And so now we're glucose only. And as a result, we're also glucose intolerant because we're not using it well.
Yeah.
And so you have too much of one fuel and you can't use it well, and you don't know how to use ketones. And so that's the problem metabolically right now. That's the dysfunction.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good stuff. And metabolic flexibility. I agree. In terms of keto, I think it became a big fad because of the weight loss benefits. But I agree with you. For me, the reason why I do more of a higher protein, higher fat, lower carb in general, I've come back to eating a little bit more carbs. I'm still pretty much always under 100 grams of carbs per day most days. But when I'm lifting a lot of weights and things like that, but I did go more keto for a while, but it's more for the, keto has been known, right? There's a whole book called The End of Alzheimer's, which I think was just basically all about, keto and high fat foods
Yeah.
being protective against Alzheimer's. Metabolic flexibility, right? The other week I was traveling and I don't eat airport food and I was traveling all day. And so I just didn't eat lunch, right? And didn't even think about it. I was totally fine. I went from breakfast to dinner without even getting hungry at all, right? So that was an example of kind of metabolic flexibility, right? If you are so hungry that you have to eat every few hours, or you just have blood sugar crashes and you can't, adapt and you can't do anything during that time, then you're not metabolically flexible. So there's so many different benefits here as well. So obviously it starts with your nutrition. It starts with eliminating the processed foods, and eating more whole foods, like you said. You also did create an ingredient. I think we should just talk about it real quick. We don't have to spend too much time on it, but you did create an ingredient as well that we sell at Peak Performance. We sell quite a bit of it now because it's such an amazing ingredient. So since you created it and we're selling it at Peak Performance, may as well talk about a little bit about Glucovantage, your super berberine product.
Yeah, so that's it's dihydroberberine. That's
Uh-huh.
the people that have known me have known for, as long as I've been keto, which is 20 years, and have known about berberine. And the great thing about this ingredient is that there's no BS here. Like, this is a test it, prove it ingredient. You can literally, use a glucometer, use a ketone meter. I can show you how well it works, period, the end. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had so many people reach out to me. My brother, for one, has struggled with his weight and metabolic issues as well, type 2 diabetes, like always been on the border of it, is a hard worker, a truck driver, but has just struggled with his, body composition. And I mean, he'll tell me like how dramatic it changes his hemoglobin A1C in
Mm.
short periods of time. And to get that to move the way he gets it to move is amazing. And I mean, I can get into just berberine alone, like the stories I have of like putting that to the test, just staggering. But
It's pretty known to be, I mean, we're not making any claims here, but in terms of metformin, which is the commonly
yeah,
prescribed diabetes drug, right?
yeah,
Berberine, which is non-prescription, especially your dihydroberberine, seems to be, as effective in many cases, in terms of the results people are getting. And it's not a prescription drug.
exactly. And so, and there was a study that this was done head to head where it looked at metformin and berberine, and the berberine outperformed metformin in a few categories and was as good as metformin in the other categories. So pretty profound that, and this is the most popular, most famous anti-aging drug in the world, metformin. There's actually a study going on with 10,000 people that are non-diabetics looking at anti-aging. It is profound. Like the more
Mm-hmm.
you can decrease insulin, decrease basal glucose levels, the longer you will live. This goes back again to metabolic dysfunction, glycation, inflammation, oxidation, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's profound. It works on this mechanism called AMPK, AMP kinase. It's one of many mechanisms, but probably the most important one. And berberine is, as you said, natural. And metformin, there was a period, I think 3 years ago, where it got recalled for being tainted. It decreases B12 levels, a lot of GI distress. It is a pharmaceutical drug. And berberine has just been shown to be safer and outperform it. Now, berberine has poor bioavailability. It takes 500 milligrams 3 times a day. You do still get some GI distress because it needs to convert from berberine to dihydroberberine in the gut.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought was, when I was looking at this pathway, what if we administered the active? And by the way, the active meaning at the gut level, because it ends up converting back to berberine at the plasma level, at the blood level. But there is some GI distress. There are some bioindividuality differences in gut microbiomes. That's another aspect of berberine, that some people convert it better than others, depending on their gut microbiome. Some people have GI distress, some people don't. So taking that out of the equation, this bioindividuality, trying to make it work for everyone and make it be better in terms of bioavailability, we see it be about 5 times better in the bioavailability, so that you can lower doses to about 150 milligrams. And then you only need to take it twice a day. It actually lasts longer in the plasma than regular berberine. So much lower doses, much more effective, less side effects, better benefits. It's kind of a slam dunk. So I've been involved in bringing that to market and getting some patents on that. And it's, to me, like, I have foundational ingredients that I recommend, certain vitamins and minerals and essential fatty acids and, leucine and, all these different things that are, probiotics and things like that, that are great. But my number one ingredient, if you were to only take one ingredient, is this one, just because it has such a profound effect, and because aging and disease is so deeply tied into this, as we just walked through. There's nothing I would recommend more, and I don't know anything that's more effective for aging, for disease, for diabetes, for your metabolic health than this ingredient. So I'm not pumping me up. I'm not pumping, your company up. This is just serious. Like, it's, if you want to live longer and live better, like your health span and lifespan, I don't know a better ingredient. And, to the point I had before, it's such a big, the government doesn't do studies on like 10,000 people very often. I'll say that. Like, this is a profound ingredient. And if you know anti-aging, when I'm speaking about metformin and these similar compounds, if you know anti-aging, that for the last 25 years, it has been the most important ingredient we know of in anti-aging. And to this point, there's still no better ingredient. There's some interesting peptides and certainly stem cell, there's things that are interesting, but nothing's been used or proven on this level like this ingredient. And to have berberine and what I feel like dihydroberberine essentially outperform it in a number of ways is pretty staggering.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an amazing, amazing ingredient. You took a great ingredient, berberine, you made it, dihydroberberine, called Glucovantage is the, if you want it, you can just search peak performance super berberine or peak performance Glucovantage. It's on Amazon. It's on the website. For those, obviously, after hearing what you just said, I'm sure many people are going to want to buy it. And it's great. You just pop one, especially if you pop one before, if you know you're going to eat a meal with a bunch of carbs or sugar or anything like that, especially before that meal, you pop one, and it really, really has amazing effects on limiting the blood sugar spikes dramatically. So yeah, that's
so dramatic. This is my story, that I tested this out using a glucometer, and I was keto at the time, and my basal glucose, my baseline glucose was around 65 to 75. I think I was at about 70, and I wanted to do this test in like back-to-back weeks. And I had my carbohydrate challenge of, I think it was 2 frosted Pop-Tarts and 3 double stuffed Oreos.
Oof.
So this is terrible. This is all like seed oils and ultra processed stuff and high glycemic carbohydrate, just terrible stuff. But this was a fun challenge.
Mhm.
And I was testing my blood sugar every 30 minutes. And when I did this without any intervention, I went up to, at 2 hours, I was at 199, and I
Wow.
don't know if I was coming back down. And
Mm.
so a week later, I did this with a dihydroberberine, and I ended up the same blood glucose baseline. At 1 hour, I was still under 100, and past that, I was coming down.
Wow. Yeah.
So, like, that is a staggering difference. I can't guarantee what the response is for you, but all I can say is, like, you can test it and you can do it yourself, and you will see a dramatic impact. And whether you were, you know, heading towards like the glucose intolerance or not, it's been shown that certainly this would be effective if you're heading in that direction of metabolic dysfunction, pre-diabetes, et cetera, or even if you're well controlled and
Yeah.
lean and athletic, the further you can reduce your insulin levels, the better. Like, that has just been shown. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the longer you will live.
Yep.
And I'm not demonizing insulin. Insulin has an amazing role. It's important. I'm just saying, like, the lower that you can keep it, like the higher your growth hormone is, the higher your autophagy is, the higher, a number of processes are that are less anabolic or metabolic in nature and more protective in nature, things that are happening, if that
Yep.
makes sense. So it's allowing the body to kind of recover and heal and protect itself versus being kind of a, digestive or anabolic mode, essentially. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, even sometimes myself when I've gotten blood tests, and I don't eat high carb, but sometimes I'm like, man, why is my, I want my blood glucose levels to be lower, on a more regular basis. So, yeah, it's obviously it's not a replacement. We're not saying go eat junk food as long as you pop your super berberine
No.
pill first, but it's definitely a great thing to supplement with. So I want to make sure we get through the rest of these as well. So we got
Yeah.
energy, we got E, and now we're back to the other E.
Exercise. So
Yep.
in here, everyone thinks they know exercise, but I am someone who's well trained in anatomy. I have a degree in exercise sports science as well that I didn't mention. Like, I'm very trained in that. I've been an athlete a lot of my life, but getting a trainer, getting an expert involved at, checking in with you, like scanning your body, making sure you're training right, important. And I get into a lot of the hacks in here that you probably don't know. Like, typically, obviously people may have heard high intensity interval training, but how to do that right in 5 to 10 minutes, you can have a lot more impact than doing hours of cardio when
Hmm.
it comes to body composition. Um, Also getting into things like intraset stretching and blood flow restriction, and a number of hacks and in workouts with intention, and what that means, and not just meaning like being intentional, but like literally thinking about your muscle as it's moving, seeing it, flexing it, contracting it, like moving it, like activating it neurologically. This has been shown to actually be effective without even doing an exercise with your muscle. There was a study done where people thought about doing a bicep exercise, and they show their bicep grew at the end of the study just from thinking about it.
Wow.
So, this is like working out with intention, doing high intensity interval training, blood flow restriction, intraset stretching, all this stuff is like really profound to get like maximal benefits in shorter time.
Yeah.
Um, Routines is the R. So that's like I get into circadian rhythm, the sleep wake cycle, how important sleep is, setting up a good morning routine, having a dialed sleep routine in the evening, and kind of wind down routine, getting into things like blue light and the exposure there. Dr. Sachin Panda's data around circadian rhythm and eating in the daylight window. Also getting into fasting, and the role that plays, and when we should fast and how we should fast. And then with growth, I get into the stoic mindset, having a resilient mindset. Much of this book is about a resilient body, but having a resilient mindset is clearly profound. And, stoicism, like Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way. I love the idea of stoicism, and really feel it's like the shift that the universe is always working for you and not against you. And when you look at like Tim Ferriss's book, Tools of Titans, it gets into these two chapters, the R and the G, where all these successful people that he interviewed, they had two themes that he found were central themes, vastly different people from all walks of life. But they had a dialed morning routine where they owned their day, essentially, like Aubrey Marcus's book. Like, they know how to own their day and feel like they're in control of what they can control, and that, the day isn't just happening to them, and they're just a unwilling passenger in this process. And the other thing is that they have a resilient mindset, that they see the opportunities in things when other people feel overwhelmed, when other people want to give up, when it seems like there's no option, no answer. These successful people see that as their time to forge ahead, as a unique circumstance, as something that's being offered to them, a lesson, an opportunity, what have you, when other people do not. And so again, and I think that can often start with the training that happens with that routine in the morning. So, that's the R and the G, the routines and the growth. And then lastly is your tribe, and maybe most importantly is who you're putting around you, and getting rid of the energy vampires, speaking of energy, and getting rid of toxic relationships, and being very intentional about who you're putting in that circle. You are the product of the 5 people closest to you. And probably the most important study on anti-aging is the Harvard study that's over 80 plus years running, the longest, most robust study in history. And the number one correlative of anti-aging is not genetics, is not socioeconomic status or cholesterol levels or any of this kind of stuff. It is quality of relationships. That's what they found over and over and over. And it doesn't even have to be happy relationships. What they found, like they found like some snippy couples that weren't exactly like loving to each other, but they were loyal to each other and had each other's backs. And that, obviously, ideally, it would be great if they were happy relationships, but they found that like that alone, just this kind of loyalty and having someone's back, was the most profound, like kind of made the most difference. And certainly having a happier relationship would, further that. But that's important, to have quality relationships, to have people around you that you can trust, that will be there for you. And, in that chapter, I get into the blue zones where people live past 100, these super centenarians. And I've been to some of these places like Nosara, Costa Rica, where I've lived, or, being in Sardinia, Italy. And these people, like the saying in Costa Rica is pura vida, like pure life. And they say it like, it's almost like an island time thing. It's like, screw it, whatever, pura vida, or it's like a hello. It's like, I'm just chilling. And you find in these cultures that these cultures slow down a lot. They're not controlled by time. like we
Mm,
typically are as Westerners. They do meals that take 2 or 3 hours. They're very patient. They make those meals. They sit down with those meals. They sit down with their loved ones and they enjoy, and it nourishes them.
mhm.
And, I think this is where, alcohol, can get really confusing on the data. People talk about red wine a lot, but I think in Sardinia, like what could be interesting is that it could be what's called a psychosomatic anchor, where the taste of red wine when sipped, especially a high quality wine, could be the anchor for your body saying, I'm safe, I'm supported, I'm having nourishing food, nourishing relationships, nourishing conversations.
Mm,
Versus like if I pound a beer with, and, loud music at a bar, it's like, it's very different, a very different experience. And
yeah.
so, that's hard to tease out, but, it's something I've been exploring. I think when we're eating our food, we tend to be like in traffic and, there's music and, you're cutting in and out of lanes and you're stressed. And even if you could be eating celery sticks and whatever,
Mhm.
but I believe like that could actually be a psychosomatic anchor for inflammation, for
Mm,
oxidation,
yeah.
because you're in a stress state and now your body's starting to associate food with stress instead of food or beverage with relaxation.
Yeah.
This is where like habits become really important because they start becoming shortcuts to your brain about what state you're in.
Mm, this is great stuff, man. This is really, really good stuff. So, any recommendations for people? I know we only got a few minutes left, but I did want to ask you around. So, around then being more mindful when you eat, and also around kind of like morning routines and owning the day.
Mhm.
Any things that you do in those situations?
Yeah, so with that mindfulness around eating, there's something called hara hachibu.
Hmm.
That's a Korean term, and that's around just eating less and eating more mindfully. Okay,
Mm,
so it's like taking your time, like put down the fork in between bites.
mhm,
Literally try this, like chew more. Think about the taste of that food. Like close your eyes. Like it seems weird, like chew 9 times.
mm,
Yeah, some people say chew 20 times. Maybe that's too extreme, especially for a Westerner.
mhm,
But like, chew, 8 or 9 times and put that fork down while you're chewing. Think about the food, think about the experience. Take breaks between bites, like enjoy it, talk to the people you're at the table with. You don't need to shovel this down in 20 minutes.
mhm.
Take your time and create anchors around that parasympathetic nature, like that you're relaxed, that you're being nourished. One of the things I like to do when I take my supplements or eat my food, some people are doing this with prayer, by the way, whether you believe in the religion or not. When you're being thankful that you have the food in front of you and, please God, nourish our bodies and, all this, like we know there's people in the world that aren't eating. That's gratitude. That's affirmations. That's putting your body in a different state, a non-inflammatory state, a parasympathetic state,
Mm,
will it where it actually will use that food better, digest that food better.
yeah.
So, no matter if you're even non-religious, try gratitude, try
Yeah.
affirmations, like try relaxing, try enjoying the food. And, that can be very transformative. I like using smaller plates too. Like if you want to go back for more, go back for more. Just take your time. It usually
Mhm.
takes about 20 minutes past when you're full to know you're full.
That's a
So if you're
key.
if you're
Yeah.
going slower, you won't feel overfull, and that's a good way to be. I don't like drinking a lot of fluids when I eat. I think there's a way that you can drink fluids prior to eating that you can kind of like pre-fill your stomach and do this, stretch technique. There's actually these stretch receptors in the stomach, but I think doing that during eating too much can actually reduce the amount of stomach acid in the stomach and how effective it'll be at digesting your food. So,
That's a good point. That's a really good point in terms of I didn't really realize I do that like unconsciously just when I eat. I never understood like, wow, people drink so much and get so many refills of drink after drink while they're eating. I just kind of never, I just never felt the need for it. But recently I had a friend who had some gut issues and they went to a gut doctor, and the gut doctor said like, hey man, stop drinking while you're eating. Stop, even water, right? Like you can drink a
Right,
little bit
exactly.
before.
Exactly, and sweet drinks, there's been studies that have shown like there's one study, I think it's with sweet tea, which when I was in the South is a thing.
Hmm.
And but even like soft drinks or whatever, that people consumed like 30 or 35% more calories at a meal because it's overriding satiety. It's
Yeah.
overriding fullness when you're having these sweet drinks. Further, sugar, sucralose, stevia, NutraSweet, they've all been shown to have an impact on the gut microbiome. And for people in particular that are already overweight or insulin resistance, there's a greater inflammatory effect and propensity to store fat as adipose,
Mm,
which I don't understand that fully. There's a lot more work that could be done there, but for some people that are thin, it doesn't seem to have the same impact as people that are already overweight.
yeah.
So it's really interesting. And this goes for these non-caloric sweeteners too. That's what I'm saying, like sucralose, which is also called Splenda.
Yeah, the diet soda, the Coke
Mhm.
Zero. I mean, I'm amazed at how many, different business meetups and things I go to, and half the room is drinking a Coke Zero because they're like, what? It's 0 calories, right? Who cares? It's
Right.
it's fine. But they're not realizing that there's a lot of studies around diet soda and 0 calorie soda, and yeah, how it's affecting your gut microbiome, which then yes, it's 0 calories now, but you may be getting more hungry later or having cravings or different issues from that.
Right. And if I was to drink a diet soda, I would minimize it. I wouldn't have it with a meal. If you
Mhm.
crave it and you look forward to it, have it on its own.
Mhm.
Enjoy it. Maybe you can find a healthier alternative, like one at some Whole Food store that's
Mhm.
doesn't have the colors and whatever it is,
Mhm.
maybe less caffeine, but you can kind of wean yourself off it. I've kind of gotten into Topo Chico and thinking like that's like having my soda.
Uh-huh.
But it's just like whatever gets you by. But I would say like trying to minimize the amount of them and certainly weaning yourself off them. I agree. And then
Yep.
as far as I think you asked about morning routine.
Yeah.
So again, anchors. I don't like to get up to like an alarm that's like meh, 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 waking up and there's cortisol that hits you. Do not look at your phone. Your phone is a trigger for stress.
Yep.
Looking at all the messages, the emails, the notifications, there's stress. You shouldn't have it by your bed. You can argue like all this EMF stuff. It's a whole other conversation, whether you believe that or not.
Mhm.
But regardless, that phone is the biggest anchor in your life. You want to talk about what I said with psychosomatic anchors? It is the most pivotal thing that is in your hands all day, every day. It
Mhm.
has a massive impact on you. And so the blue light that's being, shot at your eyeballs, the notifications that are coming across, the dopamine addiction, there's a cortisol reaction. There's a lot going on there.
Mhm.
And so it is not healthy to look at that thing first thing in the morning for a number of reasons, for your eyesight, for your brain, for your conditioning. So easing your way into the day by not looking at that, having some kind of alarm come on softly, like you can get ones that are bells that get gradually louder and closer together. You can
Mm.
have a light that comes on that gets a little brighter and brighter.
Mhm.
And then,
In a perfect world, like with me, I prefer to have no alarm whenever I can. Obviously, if I'm
that's
traveling and I need to wake up
ideal.
at 6 in the morning for a conference or whatever, but in a perfect world, no alarm. You wake up when your body's ready.
That's
Yeah.
that's it. That would be, yeah, that's perfect. And then when I do wake up, I don't rush to get out of bed. I do box breathing. So
Nice.
box breathing is a great way to get into parasympathetic.
We
Uh,
just had Mark on the podcast. We just had Mark Divine on the podcast,
oh,
actually.
nice. So
Yeah.
that's vagal tone. He might have talked
Mhm.
about the vagus nerve. But box breathing, for people that don't know it, it's called a box because you breathe in, you hold, you breathe out, you hold. So that's the four corners
Mhm.
of this box. So like let's say a 6-second box would be.
Yep. And then a hold. Yep. And for those listening that maybe aren't seeing what Sean's doing, it's basically 5 seconds inhale where you're kind of letting your stomach expand for 5 seconds. then you're holding it expanded for 5 seconds, then you're exhaling through your nose for 5 seconds, then you're holding it exhaled for 5 seconds. And
Yep.
that's the box right there. Yep.
Exactly. That's the box. And that like literally gets into alpha brainwave states, activates this vagus nerve, parasympathetic nervous system, reduced inflammation, reduced cortisol, all that. So it's a great way to kind of ease in. And then I do some affirmations. Today's going to be an amazing day. I'm healthy. I'm happy. Like I'm going to have an impact on someone. All these kinds of things. And also do gratitude work with that. Like, I'm so blessed that I have, a dog here, or, a loved one or spouse, or, whatever, that I have a car, that I have food, that, all the things that are going right for you. Like literally 99 out of 100 things go right for you every day. Let's acknowledge that versus focusing in on the one.
Right.
And then I like to get out of bed. I do some like stretching, get in my body. Ideally, like if you can get some red light, like the sunrise, some early sunshine, get grounded, those ions from the earth, the geomagnetic forces in your bare feet, move your feet through the grass. It's tactile. The dirt has soil microbiome in it that's healthy for you. So getting all that, the fresh air, that's amazing. That's a great way to ease into the day. And then I have a full glass of water before you have coffee, before you have anything else, get a full glass of water. And then, that's your day. Like, that's like, think about how different that day is versus, and then you're so exhausted because you stayed up watching Game of Thrones or the ball game. And, that was violent or sexual or like overwhelming. And you stayed up 3 hours later than you should, and you're getting up with not enough sleep. And then it's been shown that these brain cells, these neurons, are not firing as well. They're actually in acute insulin resistant state, and you don't have enough brain energy, ATP, your mitochondria aren't firing as well. So literally there's brain fog. And so you need caffeine or sugar. That's the first thing you're craving because your brain's not working right. You are inflamed. Then you get into your car and you're like weaving through traffic. You've been looking at your cell phone, you're dopamine addicted, your cortisol's up, you're inflamed, you're like overwhelmed, you're exhausted. And this is like how your day is going to start.
Yeah. It's awful.
It's just, it makes a huge difference to start your day right. And of course, starting your day right starts the evening before. And you must be mindful of your circadian rhythm and trying to go to sleep at the same time every night. Even on the weekends, there's a phenomenon called social jet lag, where it's like you're in a different time zone on the weekends, or you're traveling across 3 time zones and then traveling back, because people stay up 3-4 hours later on the weekend, and then they expect somehow Monday they're going to feel great, and it just doesn't happen. So, going to bed at the same time every night, setting your body up for success so that you can wake up with great rest. I mean, that's important. Now, obviously, it's great on occasion to stay up late and do something that's worth it. The end goal isn't like to have the best HRV in your life. It's to have the best life experiences and have a life worth living.
Yeah.
But when it's worth it, it's worth it. That's hormesis. That's the idea of like positive stress. And so when it's worth it, it's worth it. But when we're doing this all the time, like that's when I think we need to take a look at that and change our habits.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. I love this. My morning routine is pretty much identical to yours as well. Yeah, probably because I read the energy formula. So probably a good thing to wrap on. I know we're at the time. So what's the best place for people to, obviously the book, the energy formula. I listened to the audiobook before I even knew you. I loved it. What's the best place for people to buy that and learn more from you?
Energyformula.com. It's available on Amazon, but on energyformula.com, I have a ton of like free extra downloads, a fasting guide, a hidden chapter on natural movement that gets into this idea of exercise snacks and the research there, some recipe guides, all kinds of stuff. And so, yeah, energyformula.com, and then at Shawn Wells on Instagram and most of the other platforms, SHAWN. And I have a ton of cool content there that's like infographics on my top 10 supplements for depression or anxiety, for losing weight or better performance or whatever, like men's supplements, women's supplements, all kinds of things I break down, and I go well beyond supplements, a lot of biohacking ideas too. And ShawnWells.com, SHAWN, I have like a free weekly newsletter that goes out breaking down studies and all that kind of stuff. And everything's free. The book has a few dollars associated with it, but that's it. So I would love if anyone follows me. And if they have any questions from this, they can DM me on Instagram at Shawn Wells, and I would be happy to answer it. And yeah, thanks for having me on, brother. I really appreciate it.
Hey, man, it's a pleasure. Shawn is a legend in the industry, truly, truly knows his stuff, truly knows the science, really studies things. Again, kind of known in the industry as the world's greatest formulator, behind the scenes for many of the biggest supplement companies. And getting a chance to learn from him directly is just incredible. So definitely check out the book. Go to theenergyformula.com. And Shawn, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us here today.
Thanks for having me on. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. And just a reminder, if you haven't yet tried any of our Peak Performance products, you get 20% off your first order. We have one of the largest selection of USDA certified organic superfood powders, as well as very high quality supplements. And you get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com. That's www.buypeakperformance.com.